Panel interviews. You know, the ones that are like a normal interview, but instead way more intimidating with more people. Yeah, that's the one. We're gonna talk about those today. We're gonna talk about what a panel interview is exactly, why they are used, and what you can do to separate yourself as the best candidate for the job. The final steps in most interview processes is a panel interview. Why? Well, today we're gonna talk about that. We're gonna talk about what exactly a panel interview is, why it's used, and then I'm going to give you strategies to do well in them. My name is Ben with Ben Talks Talent. I've got 11 years experience in talent acquisition and recruitment, and today I'm going to show you how to crush your next panel interview. All right, if you are new here and you're watching this on YouTube, do me a favor, take 1 second and hit that subscribe button. If you're not new here, welcome back. Now, typically a panel interview is the final step of an interview process, and it includes the hiring manager, maybe an HR person, maybe a recruiter, and then a couple members of that person's team. So typically it's anywhere from 3 to 5 people, sometimes a little bit more, 3 to 6, sitting down and interviewing you at the same time, right? So you probably already spoken to several of these people, already talked to the hiring manager, already talked to HR, but now you've got a few additional people in there and they're going through a bunch of scenarios and talking to you and asking you questions. It's basically a regular interview on steroids, which is why most people are a little bit more intimidated by them. Why is it used? So, one, it's incredibly efficient, right? Let's just say you have a hire and you want multiple people to sign off and give a final, okay, yes, this is the person. It's an incredibly efficient way to do it. Instead of having 5 different people spend 5 one-hour periods, you can have an hour and a half or an hour in which these 5 people are all there asking a predetermined set of questions, and then at the end of it, you have your yay or nay. In a lot of ways, it's kind of a logical last step. You know, everybody is there, you're all getting access to the same information, you're all noticing the same things, and at the end, you can have a conversation about it, right? You can have a debrief in which everybody goes, I liked this, I'm concerned about this, or this person will fit in, whatever. But that's why they are used. It is a logical, efficient last step of an interview process. What's funny about this is it makes sense for a company to use it. In a lot of ways, it also doesn't make sense because it is perceived typically as very intimidating. I can't tell you how many times I've talked to candidates who were okay with a normal interview, but when it came time to interview with 4, 5, 6 people, they were much more nervous. And for them, it made for probably a less enjoyable candidate experience. That being said, you're probably going to have to do many of them in your career. They are not going away yet. Not all companies do it, but enough of them do it that I think it makes sense to know how to navigate them. So let's start with the tips. The first thing I want to talk about is you need to stay cool, calm, and collected. It is really easy to be nervous, right? Talking to one-on-one person, answering questions, being put on the spot, that's intimidating. Well, that's only amplified when you have to do that for 4 or 5 people. Some of these people you've never met before in your life. Now, all of a sudden, you've come in, you've met them, you're sitting on one side of the desk, and they're all throwing questions at you, and they're coming from all angles. I know that's intimidating, but your performance is only going to be made worse if you are nervous. So how can you be less nervous? I made a video on it, I'll link it right here. But generally speaking, from a 10,000 foot view, the things you can do to be less nervous are prepare, right? We'll talk about a few things in the video here, but generally speaking, if you go through and you research the company, you look up interview questions, check out my playlist for most common interview questions asked, and you kind of rehearse your answers, you're going to have a better chance of feeling confident because you are less likely to be caught off guard. So if you can go in, you can feel confident, you have a better chance of succeeding. The next thing I want to talk about is nervous tics, right? So this kind of goes hand in hand. If you're nervous, it's possible that you'll have nervous tics, like, you'll blink a lot or, you'll fidget. Normally, if you're talking to a person one-on-one and you're, eyes to eyes, they might not notice it. They might not notice it, excuse me. But if you're talking to a group of 5 people, and maybe you're having kind of a one-on-one with one person, the other people who are looking at you, they're not just noticing what you're saying and how you're saying it, but they're probably looking at little physical cues to identify if you were nervous. It's kind of human nature to look for that if you're not involved in a one-to-one conversation. So one of the things you need to be more cognizant of in that environment is making sure that you don't appear nervous because there are more people there to kind of take that in. Let's go to the next one. So the next thing I would recommend doing is knowing who you're speaking with, right? So before this interview, in all likelihood, you'll get an email with an invite. And on that invite, you can click and see who's attending, find those people and go find them on LinkedIn. Now, all those people have the benefit of knowing who you are, right? They might get a copy of your resume, they'll probably go to your LinkedIn profile, and they'll know all about you and your background. So why shouldn't you do the same thing to them? I would totally recommend doing it. For me, I think it serves a ton of purposes. One, you can look at them, you can look at their trajectory with the organization. Have they been promoted? Are they a high performer? That's why they're part of the panel? You can look to see past companies. Have they worked at any of the same places at you? Where did they go to school? Did they go to school at your school? I think it's important to just know who's there, what their function is within the organization, and if there's anything extra you can pick from that profile, I would absolutely do it. It can be a benefit later on in the process. Let's assume that you're gonna go there and you're meeting with 5 people. How many copies of your resume should you bring? Some of you are thinking, oh, I should bring a resume? Yeah, absolutely. When I'm interviewing people, I actually don't care if they bring a resume for me, if I'm interviewing someone for my team. But I have other people on my team who are immediately like, oh my gosh, I can't believe they didn't bring a copy of their resume. So let's just assume 50% of the people will want you to bring a hard copy of your resume. If we can assume that, then you should always bring it so you don't have a coin flip of pissing somebody off, right? So if there are 5 people, how many copies of your resume should you bring? 6. I always tell people, bring the amount of people who you think are gonna be there plus 1 in case there's an extra person, you can give it there. The last thing you wanna do is go there and have a resume copy for everybody except for one person. That can be really awkward. The next thing I want to talk about is you need to have questions prepared, right? You have a group of people there who have different experiences, different tenures, different roles, different functions within the organization. If you come to that interview and you don't have questions prepared to ask them, it is going to look terrible. So one, this is kind of a 2-part thing. Have questions. I would go there with 15 to 20 questions prepared to ask, and if you don't get to ask all of them, that's okay. It is much better to have too many questions than to have too few. Bonus points here, if you can go and look at someone's background and you can have questions prepared for them ahead of time, right? So you'll have questions for the hiring manager, clearly, right? You might have questions for HR on culture and maybe on employee retention. You'll have those. Those are easy. But what about the people on the team? If you can find questions specifically for other people who are part of this panel, specific to their experience within the organization, that is a strong move, right? So let's just say you have someone named Sarah and she's part of the team. She's a senior person. If you can go, Sarah, I took a look at your LinkedIn profile and I noticed that you've been promoted within this organization, but you were part of another vertical before moving into sales. How do you think that helped you be better positioned for your role currently within the organization or something like that, right? Basically showing them, one, I did research and I know who you are and I'm asking you a question specific to your experience. That is a very strong move and a solid tip for doing well in a panel interview. The next thing I want to talk about is the focus, right? The focus of your attention. When you are in a panel interview, one of the easiest, most commonly made mistakes is you're gonna spend a lot of time addressing the hiring manager, right? You're thinking to yourself, they're the one who makes the decisions, so I should probably spend the most time looking straight at them. Wrong, that's a bad decision. I have seen so many candidates get knocked out of the process because they ignored one of the people, right? So if I was you, and I was in a panel interview, and when I've done panel interviews, I always make sure that I try to spread my attention to multiple people. I'm not just answering towards the person who asked the question. Sure, I'm addressing them directly, but then I'm also looking at their contemporaries. I'm looking at the other people in the interview, and I'm making sure that I'm investing my attention into each of them pretty equally, maybe a little bit more proportionally to the person asking the interview question, but the reality is when you were in a panel interview, you need to spend time looking at every single person. The last thing I want to talk about are thank you emails. When you are doing a panel interview, send a thank you email to every single person. If you can remember something that each person said and personalize it, it'll make it that much more powerful. At the end of the day, sending one mass thank you just makes it seem like you went halfway with the effort. You want to go 100% of the way with the effort. And there you have it. Those are my tips. If you can do those things, you will succeed in a panel interview. Thank you for watching. Good luck in your next interview. You've got this.